Mesdames et messieurs, bonsoir. Bienvenue dans l'émission EcoFeminisme. Ce soir, on va commencer l'émission en anglais parce que notre invité vient des États-Unis. Juan Carlos Folktales est notre invité de l'Université de Floride et c'est un poète environnementaliste et aussi donc un activiste qui lutte contre le réchauffement climatique en Amazonie. We are going to start in English. So, welcome to Brussels, Dr. Galeano.
Thank you, Manel. Thank you for having me in this show.
My pleasure. So, Dr. Galeano is a professor at the University of Florida. He is a poet, a scholar, and environmentalist. So, we are very glad to have you here in Brussels and Europe for the first time. And we're happy to have a discussion with you about poems, about the environment, about climate change, but above all, about ecofeminism, because ecofeminism, as you know, is the title of this TV show. So, please, can you introduce yourself, speak about your poetry, your engagement, and so on and so forth?
Thanks, Manel. Thanks again for having me here. It's truly an honor to share my poetry, to talk about the Amazon and talk about the environment and the pressing environmental issues and climate change in Amazonia. Probably I should start by saying that I was born in the Amazon and
wow.
In the Colombian Amazon actually. And you were asking me last night about poetry and how I became a poet and my engagement with environmental issues. Well, I was fortunate that I grew up in a place where the presence of indigenous cultures was still alive, and my parents they were from the Andes, from the mountainous areas of Colombia, and then there was a civil war in the country during the 50s and 60s, and they moved to the Amazon, like many people did back in those days, to avoid getting killed, and that's the reason I was born there, and as a child I grew up in a world that was very much close to the sensorial aspects of our relationship with the non-human world. I grew up in the small farms where my grandparents lived. I used to spend almost every day there, and but also I enjoyed being in the company of a lot of indigenous people, descendants of the many ethnic groups that were still alive in the area after they had been decimated almost 100 years before, or 70 to 80 years before, by the rubber boom era, that era that where a lot of the indigenous people were forced to work in the extraction of rubber.
Okay. So, what has been the relationship between Amazonia and the Western world? Because you are speaking about the history of the indigenous people, speaking about Amazonia in general, and how were these people, used and abused to work in certain areas. So, how can you explain this relationship between the Amazonian world and the Western one?
Well, a lot of these encounters, I would say. a lot of these encounters that started out, with the first explorers, the first people that came to that area. We have to go back to the 16th century, where when a lot of the foundations, a lot of foundational text about books and narratives about Amazonia were constructed. In 1542, the discoverers of the Amazon River, spoke of this place as a place that was inhabited by the fierce Amazons. You see, they recreated the myth of the classical world in order to describe a land that needed to be tame, needed to be organized, but in the wrong way. Setting up a set of an array of misconceptions about the place that had been rehatched over the centuries. And that's what I'm talking about, these encounters, because the Western world keep having these encounters with those lands. They saw that those lands as, these lands are appropriate for cattle, bringing cattle here, for setting up different types of crops. I mean, bringing in crops like the ones that we have in Europe. So they are setting up the foundations for agricultural practices and cattle ranching practices in Amazonia that had been all throughout the past 5 centuries, that have brought phenomena or facts like deforestation in Amazonia. Those are factors that, as you know, contribute to the climate change nowadays.
Of course.
Yeah.
So we are going to speak about the environmental problems in Amazonia, for instance. But how is your project, Folktales of the Amazon? So this is the book by Galeano. How this project is linked to the discussions on current environmental issues. So we know that sometimes there is a bridge we need to bridge the gap between literary works and current environmental issues, but sometimes literature carry a lot of political and environmental issues. How can you establish this connection within your poems?
Well, there's a lot to say. Well, let's start talking about the oral narratives, the so-called folktales of the Amazon.
And this is what we are going to, to focus on during, especially your folktales, especially in terms of ecofeminism and how women are contributing to fighting against climate change and defending the environment. Okay.
Well, those are oral narratives that give account of different kind of relationship of people with the non-human world, with the environment. And let's give some frameworks to it. Yeah. They are part nowadays part of our current cultural narratives, academic, intellectual, if you want to call it that way, that is called the environmental humanities.
Of course.
Meaning the type of discourses, the type of oral metaphors, all kinds of narratives that give us accounts of different ways of related to the non-human world. So if we talk about the folk tales of the Amazon, but not only the folk tales of the Amazon, folk tales of all kinds of traditional cultures from all over the world, you know, from Africa, from Australia, from Asia, the United States, you know, the Native American tales, that perceive the world in a way, in a monistic kind of way, where there isn't that divide between the human world and the and nature.
Non-human world,
So that, you know, for that matter, those are foundational texts, foundational, almost like a theory that concurs with our current theories about how we need to relate to the environment, to our surroundings. Because those people, you know, the 800, you know, ethnic groups of Amazonia, you know, that at the time of the arrival of Europeans there, they have an animistic world. They have a view of a socialized nature. They, because in the myriad of narratives that they have, their myth, the trees, the rivers, places, boulders, they were people.
Yeah,
at the beginning of time, they were people. And but because of the, you know, processes of transformations, wars, love, and all sorts of processes, some of them ended, you know, in different places, and but still, they still are perceived by indigenous cultures as their brothers, as their ancestors, as their grandfather.
Yeah.
And for instance, you know,
my mother is a tree, so it's like
exactly,
or this connection with
or they see some of the guardians of the forest as their ancestors, as their grandfather. They say, we don't do this excessive hunting because grandfather such and such is not gonna like that. So you see, those are the kind of paradigms that are important for us in the current times to look at, and this all falls within the frameworks that I was saying, the environmental humanities, meaning that in our facing the climate change nowadays, we don't only need to look at scientific data. It's important, but that it needs to be coupled with all this other information about our relationship. Because we had agency, definitely. It has been proved that we have had agency in the transformation of ecosystems and the earth. So that's why that divide, that gap between what science tells us about the earth needs to be coupled with literature, cultural anthropology,
of course.
Feminism, because feminism give us accounts of the critique of what has been wrong in the relationship, you know, between men and women, and that there is a link also that has been established, you know, in cultural studies and in our culture, you know, over the past 20, 30 years, between the abuses to women and abuses to the land.
Nature,
So, for that matter, but But anyway, I guess there is a lot to talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely. But for instance, can you give us an example from your documentary? Because you are not only a poet or a scholar or environmentalist, but you are a filmmaker, documentary maker, and you made a documentary on the Amazon to speak about certain tales, certain narratives of these people, of the inhabitants of the inhabitants of the Amazon. So how would you qualify this documentary? How would you?
Okay, well, that's a documentary that I made years ago. It called The Trees Have a Mother.
The Trees Have a Mother.
Los árboles tienen madre. That's the title in
Beautiful.
Spanish. And to begin with, the title came out from the narratives of the people that were interviewed for the film. And the film, it's about the storyline of the film. Is about a mother who has lost her son because her son has been kidnapped by a spirit of the forest. A spirit of the forest that has fallen in love with him and I wanted to have him as a husband, and which is based on a true story. It actually happened. That somebody disappeared in the forest. He was going to visit.
But there were interpretations to this disappearance.
Right, exactly. So the mother goes from shaman to shaman, inquiring about the whereabouts of her son, and so then we get all these stories woven by the shamans, and but at the same time, a lot of opinions about the spirits of the forest and what they do, and how they are guardians of the forest, and how they punish the people who abuse the forest. Yeah. But at the same time, in their accounts, they are talking about logging companies, mining companies, all sorts of abuses that are happening, deforestation, how the spirits of the forest in certain areas, they don't live in certain areas. Why? Because those areas are deforested. The trees are gone. So obviously the trees are gone. The dwellings of those guardians of the forest are no longer there. So they have to go away. So you see how
it's interrelated.
They become paradigms of the vicious cycles in which we are falling, in which we are making nature to fall into, right? Because if we got deforestation, we don't have any trees to pick up the solar energy to turn it into vapor, and to turn it into clouds, to turn it into rain.
Yeah.
So it's what those folk tales are really poetic, symbolic narratives of what is happening. So really, like my friend environmentalist Johnny Adamson,
Johnny Adamson
posed one time, just talking about how a guardian of the forest, a guardian of the rivers, a mother of the rivers, what they really represent. Okay, they are symbolic narratives, right? And but what they really represent are entire ecosystems, bioregions. What happens, right? That whatever we do to this non-human world, it's going to come back.
It's like
in a form of illness, in a form of famine, in a form of floods, erosions and all that. So you see how, in many ways, those are cautionary tales. That's the value that they have for our modern world.
You mean an instructive side?
Exactly.
There is sensitizing and instructing side by these folk tales, as you know.
Yeah.
This, helped me to ask it paves the way for my next question, which is, I think, the purpose of this TV show is sensitizing people about climate change and making climate change a real issue, not something, because in certain, as we have discussed, that in certain continents or in certain countries, climate change is not real, a real problem, but it's something, that you consider a future problem. Just like in Africa or in certain African countries, because they have the repercussions of the climate change, but they have other problems too in the agenda. So how would you, for instance, think about teaching climate change? Because I saw that you were organizing missions to the Amazon and teaching people and taking students. Talk a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about this experience with your students and how teaching climate change can be very, very inspiring to young people, to the new generation, and sensitizing the young generation about the effects of global warming and all that stuff.
Well, that's interesting, that question, because it takes me back to the time when I was making this documentary, that I thought, the fate of Amazonia is not only there are a lot of factors that play in the fate of Amazonia, because the Western world relates to that place.
Yeah.
You can think about those places, they have been affected, they have been transformed for the many times that it turns into cycles of extractivism of commodities from the place, of Amazonia. And we got the examples, there has been extractivism of medicinal plants, 2 centuries ago, timber, rubber, right? That caused so many genocides in the place. Feathers, oil, that has caused so much destruction of rivers and forest, and cocaine, and so really the West needs to be the Western world needs to be educated, and so I thought of doing a small scale as we academics do, and I created a program in which few students of my university, Florida State University, go to the Amazon and work in indigenous organizations, NGOs, hospitals, and the university, and they share, the skills that they have there, put them put them to work. But they also learn about the place, and learn about the place from the perspective of Amazonians. Learn how to look at that place with the eyes of Amazonians. And again, that is, in doing so, that's, it falls into the tradition of, anthropologist Fran Boas, right, of that, in order to talk about a place, in order to come up with a narrative about a place, we need to go to that place and construct it from the perspective of the people from that place. So that's trying to change the minds of young people that go there. So that's that will be a way to shift, all this pervasive paradigm that we have had in the Western culture about those places. Yeah.
Do you think that young people are ready to experience this kind of things? They are really, conscious about the, dangers of climate change, about global warming. Do you think that they need more sensitizing through climate change teaching or through this module, going, into the experience of the Amazon or certain parts of Africa or Asia or whatsoever, or Latin America, to be, immersed into the culture and see how climate change would affect these people, directly?
Well, that only if there is a shift in the educational systems of the Western world,
of
right?
Course, yeah.
If they create those templates, those possibilities for their people to go and experience the lives in those places. Because, the interesting part when we talk about climate change is that the people who are paying the price of our practices, of our good life in the Western world,
yeah.
of our air conditioning, of our cars, of all our luxuries and commodities, we are not paying for that. We are not suffering climate change. Who is suffering climate change in Europe or in the United States?
Yeah, a little bit.
Very few people.
Yeah.
Very few people.
But I think the repercussions are coming. Yeah, but
the ones who are paying the price for this climate change, are people in Africa, are people in Latin America, and in all these many places that are being affected by the transformations, in the biosystems of the earth.
Yeah.
We in the Western world, there are so many ways, the economic power, will come in to mitigate, the effects of climate change. But the ones who pay the price are those people and those places that have been abused throughout centuries.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And what do you think about, lately US and China took as initiative by agreeing the climate deal of COP21, and what are you waiting in COP22? What are you waiting for as an environmentalist? Which will take place in Marrakesh, in an African continent, so for the first time.
Well,
which is very symbolic.
Yeah, but real action.
Yeah, so you're waiting for real action.
Yeah, because we haven't seen that, those steps being taken, and data and facts being taken seriously.
Yeah.
And there are unfortunately other so pressing needs, but within our species, the human species, and but the problem is that if we lose the house where the species lives, that's the end of the story, right?
Yeah,
that's
there is no planet B.
Right. There is the end of the story for that folktale. That's the thing, when the scientists tell us that by the year 2030, at the rate of things, you know, half of the Amazon rainforest will be gone, and the race of some degrees will bring so many disasters and points of no return, really. So anyway, but that's those are those are part of the facts. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
So, what do you think of the Marshall Islands poet? Poem which was addressed to the UN climate summit in COP21. How do you see that? When a poet, addressed the UN climate summit to sensitize people or to draw people's attention and the public opinion about the Marshall Islands?
Well, that those are symbolic acts, mm-hmm. And after all, a poet is a visionary, you know.
Yeah.
A poet, serves that function, you know, that religion used to have, right? He's a poet, and when I say a poet, I'm talking about somebody who works just with words, right? By a painter, a filmmaker, musician,
an artist.
An artist. It's somebody who is able to connect the dots.
Yeah, as you said, this is your own words. So poetry is connecting the dots.
Right. But also to be able to touch people's hearts.
Absolutely.
So to speak, to talk with a language, to arrange words, let's put it that way, in such manner that he's able to pull that chord of the heart of people. So to speak, that as if the poet, the artist, the person were to become a vehicle of others people suffering in many cases.
Yeah.
When you talk about some kind of political poetry in many cases.
Let us remind the auditors and the viewers that you have a PhD in political poetry, so you are an expert.
I wrote my dissertation on poetry of violence. I remember that. Although that's a type of poetry that I don't write, but anyway, going back to the subject mm-hmm. of the poet being sort of like the vehicle of a world. I want to say a world. I'm thinking about people only, but everything. Rivers, mountains, trees, clouds,
islands
that are who are speaking in a very moving, emotional way, if you will, through his voice, through his body. That would be a definition of poetry.
Poetic activism, let us say. Yeah.
Poetic activism.
Yes,
it can be felt that way, and many times it could also be bad poetry. that could be worrisome for me as a poet. So not to fall into that, right?
Okay. And what are the most pressing environmental problems on the Amazon, according to you?
So many.
At present.
So many.
Mm-hmm.
Deforestation. Is one. Mining.
Yeah.
And oil. Drilling for oil.
Drilling for oil.
Why? Because it brings the destruction of so many ecosystems there.
Okay.
You know? We talk about, let's take the case of deforestation. Deforestation for what? You know, for cattle ranching, for monocrops. There are practices that are nonsensical because the soils of Amazonia, the richness of those soils are not on the ground. They are in the leaves of the trees.
Okay.
You know, there's this cycle, right?
There's a cycle.
The leaves decay, and they provide nutrients for the trees to grow and to have this luscious Amazonia of an humongous, immense biodiversity that sometimes acts as a mirage, that is deceiving, that makes people think, oh, these lands are so fertile. You know, we can go there and grow everything. Well, that's not true. That's not true. The minute you take those trees down, the very few nutrients wash down, and that affect the rivers because it will do away with the habitats of other ecosystems, you know, of fish, for instance.
Fish, yes.
And so mining, you know, there are rivers where people cannot eat the fish of those rivers because the excess of mercury due to mining. You know, I think of in Madre de Dios, some of the rivers, it's the Peruvian Amazon, being destroyed by mining. Not to talk about the effects in humans, you know, because all these toxic agents goes into small streams, and indigenous people, children of indigenous people, are gonna get illnesses and die out of these toxic elements. So there are so many, you know, the drilling for oil destroys the habitats of so many animals there. So there, and I'm just mentioning a few. I mean, things. So.
And what are the solutions to this environmental crisis in the Amazon region?
That's
the point.
That's really opening a can of worms, because you're talking about political systems that cannot solve issues of unequal distribution of wealth. You know, in the cases of you know, all the countries that share Amazonia, all the you know, Brazil, Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, Venezuela, where Amazonia is used, so to speak, or has been used by government many times, or simply just as a fact, as a piggy bank, like you know, to the maladies provoked by unequal distribution of wealth and social injustice in other areas of the country. And so many people end up going to Amazonia to look for a way to survive. And in doing so, even though they are very poor, even though they are the dispossessed of the earth, of those places, they become the agents of the destruction of those places. They become the people that will go and do logging for the entrepreneurs who live in Lima, in Bogota, in Brasilia, and the bigger entrepreneurs who are in New York or Hong Kong or who have no idea or don't care simply. For them, nature is totally outside of their realm. They are counting only numbers, money, without realizing, what a tree means to so many entities and beings of the place,
Okay. But let us move to a positive example, because we have we heard that you came from Sweden, from the International Conference of ASLI, the Association of Culture, Literature and the Environment, and we know that there is a huge businessman called Elias who bought rainforests in the Amazonia. So what do you think about Sweden, the examples, certain European countries who made huge effort to end up fossil fuel, to use solar energy, wind energy? What do you think of these countries?
We would like for those examples to be followed by other countries on the earth, right?
Yeah.
And but unfortunately, we are not there yet.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that the addressing the problems of social inequalities in the countries.
And
is one.
If we link it with feminism as well,
right,
yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that coupled with education.
Of course.
And education but not the education dictated by the metropolis, the so-called metropolis, meaning no education about Amazonia dictated by people from the Andes, from a big city. But the education created based on the needs and local knowledge of the people of the place, and the peoples of Amazonia in this case. Mm-hmm. So that will move to solutions, but there are different factors that needs to be addressed. Unfortunately, because the problem is that all these countries they want to grow economically, or many times their economies are driven, their practices are driven by the needs, the economic needs for growth of the bigger countries, the leading economies of the world. And so those are some factors that need to be addressed. Mm-hmm. And those factors need to be addressed by establishing a critique to those practices in those countries.
And by creating green business and green economy, which is the case of so many leading countries in that field.
Green countries, greener countries, that unfortunately are so few, and we will want to see more of this in the West.
Absolutely. Now, I think that we are heading to the end of this beautiful conversation with you, but we would love to hear a poem of your choice in order to, to be, immersed in your universe of the Amazon. So if you
let's pick up a poem then that speaks about Amazonia. It speaks about folktales, and it speaks about the value of folktales as a cautionary tales, so to speak, for us in the modern world. There is a poem on a guardian of the forest called Curupira. It's called Curupira in the Brazilian Amazon and in the Colombian Amazon, and it is on page 81 of the book. This is a French edition of my book Amazonia. So what I propose, Manel, is that I read the Spanish version, and you, French-speaking person. Perfect.
So that our auditors can hear the French version, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
As well.
Okay. So, in Spanish, it goes like this. Con un pie, Curupira. That's the name of the guardian of the forest, Curupira. Con un pie mirando adelante y el otro para atrás, el Curupira camina por la selva, cuidando los animales y haciéndole las trenzas a las palmeras jovencitas. Los cazadores le regalan tabacos al Curupira para que les diga sus secretos. El Curupira se fuma los tabacos y del humo se forman los caminos donde aparecen animales, árboles y frutas. Pero los hombres no deben llevarse todos los animales, árboles y frutas. El Curupira podría soplar el humo para que desaparezcan los animales, árboles y frutas. Puede soplar todo su humo para que desaparezcan los caminos. También podría decirles a los animales sus secretos para cazar a los hombres.
Thank you. So the French version now. Curupira. Avec un pied regardant devant et l'autre derrière, le Curupira marche dans la forêt, en s'occupant des animaux et en faisant des tresses aux jeunes palmiers. Les chasseurs offrent des cigarettes au Curupira pour qu'il leur dise ses secrets. Le Curupira fume les cigarettes et la fumée ouvre des chemins où apparaissent des animaux, des arbres et des fruits. Mais les hommes ne peuvent transporter tous les animaux, les arbres et les fruits. Le Curupira pourrait souffler la fumée pour que les animaux, les arbres et les fruits disparaissent. Il peut souffler toute sa fumée pour que les chemins disparaissent. Il pourrait aussi dire aux animaux ses secrets pour chasser les hommes. Very beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here with us in Brussels, in Europe. We are very glad to have you here. We hope that people would connect with you, so please go to the website of Professor Dr. Galeano. You will find the documentary, you will find his poems, and you are launching a new NGO, I think. So people who are interested, this is a call for people who are interested to in this NGO, which is going to be launched in the Amazon. Yes?
Yeah, well, it's an organization that I'm created with some friend of mine, indigenous peoples of the Amazon, to educate people about the Amazonia from their perspective. So it's a different
from
kind
the perspectives of the
Amazonians. And I'm working on currently I'm working on a documentary film on the affectionate relationship between people and rivers of Amazonia.
So we are waiting for this new documentary.
I hope that I can finish it by next year, and
hope that we can have you here in Brussels, and maybe for a conference with the documentary as well.
Thank you, Manel.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for following us. We hope that we will find you next week. Follow us on Almouwatin TV. And just, excuse me, just one remark, because I forgot to mention that, is that Almouwatin TV is, as I said, the citizen, and as I explained to you, the main, the main objective of this channel is to contribute to the well-being of the country, to contribute to a coexistence, tolerance, respect, and love between people, no matter what their religion, their background, their social background, and so on and so forth. And you told me that there is, I think, that there is a concept which is also called
El buen vivir, no?
Yes,
El buen vivir. So.
In the Amazonia. So Almouwatin TV in the Amazonian language would be
El buen vivir.
El buen vivir. Thank you. So we learn a word from Dr. Galeano. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention et on vous donne rendez-vous mardi prochain. Au revoir.